Hello everyone, my name is Fatma and I will be taking you through a brief introduction into web development and what it entails and web technologies. So to begin with, a web application refers to all types of application in which part of it or the whole application is hosted on a web server. So what do we mean by this? This means that an application is accessed through a web browser using an active internet connection. Now, in this session, we will be exploring how these applications are built, what materials are needed, and what tools are needed. These materials and tools combined together are what we term as web technologies. Now, in web development, we can divide it into two parts: the front-end development and the back-end development. The front-end development, we will be discussing technologies such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And in the back-end, we will touch a little bit on frameworks and languages such as PHP, Python, and Java. Front-end development. Front-end development is also known as client-side web development. This is everything in a web application that a client sees or interacts with. It could be pictures, it could be buttons, it could be sliders, it could be even the color of the page itself. All this is part and parcel of front-end development. In simple forms, we can say that front-end development is the development of the user graphical interface, which is also known as GUI in technical terms. Now, to develop this interface, or basically develop the skeleton of this interface, you need a certain type of language or certain types of tools. You can take an example of a carpenter. When a carpenter wants to make a table, they will need wood, they will need nails, they will need the instructions on how to make the table. For example, cut the wood into 8 pieces or 4 pieces. Now, these instructions are given in English, but when you're communicating with a computer or you're communicating with a program, then you need to learn the language for it. Some of the languages that we use are, we have JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. These tools that I have mentioned are used to develop how the site would look like. For example, the HTML offers the skeleton of the application. The CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, is a style sheet language used for describing the presentation of a document written in HTML. So the HTML is the skeleton. The CSS defines the styling of that page. Then comes in the JavaScript. JavaScript is used by programmers across the world to create dynamic interactive web contents. I will give you a simple example that you might have interacted with. There are some applications whereby when you hit a button, the button feels like it's moving forward. Or when you hover next to a button, the button changes color. All this interactivity is JavaScript. Now that you know a bit of front-end development, let's jump into back-end development. Back-end development or server-side development refers to whatever happens behind the scenes. Things that the user does not interact with and does not know, but they happen. For example, when you go into a site as famous as Facebook and you put in your email and your password, then you click on login. The verification that this person is you, or the logic behind finding your details and finding out if that is your password, this logic is made in the backend. Okay? Now, there are some sites and some web applications that do not need the backend. For example, an information site that only tells you, hi, my name is Fatma, this is what I do. You won't need the backend. However, with applications that have logic and majorly connecting to a database, either fetching the data, an application where you are storing someone's data, for example, in the hospital when they're taking up your weight and height and storing it in the system, that system will need a backend. Now, just as we've seen that in the front end, you would need to learn a certain language for you to write instructions or code instructions to make the page beautiful, you will also need to learn some logical languages for the backend. Now, for the backend, we have languages such as PHP, which is Hypertext Processor. It's a language that's used to write logic. Then we have also Python, and we have Ruby, among the many languages that we have for backend development. Now, you've seen how to develop the front end, and I have explained a bit on how the backend works. We said the backend is anything that happens behind the scenes. These two combined makes a web application. However, you can also have websites that do not have backends. Finally, let's discuss about frameworks. I will touch lightly on frameworks. A framework is a structure that you can build software on. It serves as a foundation, basically a boilerplate, so that you don't have to code everything from scratch. As my analogy that I gave before, you have a carpenter that goes to the forest and cuts the wood and brings it home and makes a table. Another carpenter goes to the workshop where wood that has already been cut into pieces and it is refined and well, and all they have to do is assemble. A framework does some sort of that type of thing. It gives you a boilerplate, a foundation, some things that are already pre-coded, so you don't have to do everything from scratch. And all frameworks are closely tied with a language. For example, we've talked about PHP. A framework for PHP is Laravel. JavaScript has a number of frameworks. Some of them would include AngularJS and React. And finally, we have Python, which has its framework, Django. And that's it. That's all you need to know about a brief introduction into web development. I hope to see you in the next section. Thank you.